His office was in Citibank Tower, one of the most prestigious business addresses in Manila. He'd just been honored for donating to a children's hospital, and investors lined up to hand him $40,000 at a time, convinced he could make them rich through foreign currency trading. His name was Michael Liew, and over the course of a few short years, Filipino investors handed his company more than $250 million. When it collapsed, the liquidator could find barely $2 million left anywhere in the company's accounts. This is the story of Performance Investments Products Corporation, PIPC, and the Singaporean businessman who vanished with almost all of it. Michael Liew set up PIPC in the Philippines in 1998, presenting it as an online foreign exchange trading service. Unlike many of the scandals that came after it, PIPC wasn't targeting poor families looking for a miracle. Its minimum investment was $40,000, at the time around 2 million pesos. This was a scheme built for the wealthy, and Liew didn't look like a con artist. He looked like exactly the kind of person wealthy Filipinos trusted with their money. PIPC's offices sat inside Citibank Tower in Makati, the financial heart of the Philippines, one of the most respected business addresses in the entire country. And Liew had a story that made him even more sympathetic. The Philippine General Hospital's own website said he personally donated to renovate part of its obstetrics and gynecology wing, dedicating the project to family members he said had died in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami in Phuket, Thailand. He personally led the ribbon cutting at the renovation's inauguration and was publicly presented with a plaque honoring his philanthropy. A grieving philanthropist, operating out of one of Manila's most prestigious office towers. It's hard to imagine a more convincing disguise. The pitch itself was carefully built to sound sophisticated, not greedy. Investors weren't promised some impossible 40% a week. They were offered what PIPC called a performance management portfolio, foreign exchange trading, with an annual return of around 12 to 15%. That's a number that sounds almost reasonable, especially to investors who'd never trade currencies themselves and had no way to verify what was actually happening with their money. According to later complaints, sales agents told investors their losses would be capped at no more than 30%, a safety net that made the whole thing feel even more credible. One investor, a Spanish national named Jose Piconel, said he was introduced to PIPC over lunch at a Makati restaurant, hosted personally by one of the company's executives. He and a co-investor each put in $20,000 that same week. For years, this approach worked. Word spread through the Philippines' wealthiest social circles. Politicians, business owners, and members of well-known families all became investors. Eventually, prosecutors say, Filipino investors alone poured more than $250 million into PIPC's various investment schemes. But in 2007, everything started to unravel. The Securities and Exchange Commission, led by Chairman Faye Barron, confirmed it had been quietly investigating PIPC after complaints from investors who weren't getting their money back. And then, the man at the center of it all simply disappeared. A court-appointed liquidator, brought in to untangle PIPC's finances, eventually traced where the bulk of the money had actually gone. Hong Kong bank accounts held under the PIPC name. Of the more than $138 million investigators could directly confirm Filipino investors had deposited, the liquidator's report found barely $2 million remaining anywhere in those accounts. Liew, prosecutors later alleged, had simply taken the money and left the company empty-handed. What followed was a slow-moving legal effort that, more than a decade later, still hasn't produced a clear resolution. In 2008, Philippine prosecutors recommended charging Liew and several PIPC executives with syndicated estafa, a charge that can carry a sentence of life imprisonment. By 2009, the case had grown again. Prosecutors said evidence from elite investors showed the company had defrauded victims of up to 2 billion pesos in that group alone, with the broader scheme eventually alleged to involve as much as $250 million in total. Dozens of PIPC officers, agents, and employees were named across multiple criminal complaints. Some were accused of knowingly selling unregistered securities without any license from the SEC to do so. But Michael Liew himself was never brought back to the Philippines to face any of it. Unlike Manuel Amalilio, who was at least arrested abroad before a Malaysian court controversially let him go, there's no public record of Liew ever being apprehended anywhere by anyone at all. In 2011, years after the scandal first broke, the SEC formally moved to revoke PIPC's corporate registration entirely, a largely symbolic final step, given the company had already collapsed years earlier. Online forums and message boards that followed the case for years eventually stopped finding anything new to report. No conviction, no prison sentence, no public confirmation of where Liew even is. Compare that to Bernie Madoff, whose nearly identical American scheme collapsed around the same time PIPC was unraveling. Madoff was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 150 years in prison within months. Filipino investigators and victims watched that case unfold almost in real time and continued waiting for anything resembling that outcome in their own. As of today, no public record confirms that anyone has ever served real prison time for what happened to the more than $250 million PIPC investors handed over. PIPC didn't promise impossible riches in 8 days, or hide behind a church, or rely on a mayor's office. It simply wore the most convincing disguise of all. A prestigious address, a believable return, and a story of personal tragedy that made questioning it feel almost unkind. Sometimes the biggest red flag isn't the promise, it's how comfortable everyone feels not asking questions. If you enjoyed this story, click on the subscribe button